Just get your mind together and come on across to me. We'll hold hands and we'll watch the sun rise from the bottom of the sea. But first, are you experienced? Have you ever been experienced? Well, I have. Well, it's a super important chapter, really. And it's really the change that has happened to the world since the Industrial Revolution and the creation of the technological society. And there's a move more and more to bigger, more complex machines and fewer operators, so that the machine can be operated by a single human being. So this is an individual, not a couple and not a group, because it's very important to understand that the levels of consciousness of humanity start with the individual, grow to a higher consciousness in the couple, grow to a higher consciousness in the family group, which works together, and then grows into an even higher consciousness as a group of people come together to do tasks that no one person can actually do by themselves, and must work together to create the result which is higher than any individual can possibly create. And this is perfectly exampled in the group The Beatles. Okay, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let that sink in. Now, the Beatles were a divine, natural group. They weren't a demonic organisation. And there's a difference. I'll try to explain it briefly what this difference is. The Beatles came together by following the great way of nature. And they met each other walking the same path. They met together, they liked each other, they enjoyed each other's company, they had common interests that brought them together, and they naturally formed into a group. Now, the other way to do this is for one individual to, let's say they're a singer and they want to create music and a band, okay, they want to make a band. Then what they will do is they will put advertisements somewhere to try to attract candidates who will then perform for them, and they will then measure them, and they will try to decide from those measurements which people to pick to become part of the organisation. And the person doing it will be the head of the organisation, and all the other people will become underneath them in a pyramid structure. And this will become an organisation. They will sign a contract, they will decide to work together with a record company, and they will make records to make money and break into the big time. Okay, now that's not what the Beatles did. The Beatles were a product of the 60s revolution, where people were going back to nature and natural forms of organisation. So the Beatles came together with a love for skiffle music, the new music that was suddenly appearing on the scene in the UK. And so they started to play this music together, and they got better and better at it and enjoyed doing it together. Now, the interesting thing about the Beatles were, at an early stage in their journey, they all had ladies. They were not single men. They were actually partnered together as couples. So the process of forming the great natural organisation of the band, the Beatles, involved first making at least two couples to form the nucleus, and then the other couples came. And this brought the power of the couple to be able to go then with all four members to the next level. Well, there were five actually. Pete Best was there, and I'm going to talk about him in a minute. To evolve them all upwards into the journey of group consciousness. And the group consciousness, you can all do separate jobs and functions all at the same time, and the whole thing is moved in a harmony. Okay, harmony means working together. And that's where the title of this chapter comes from. I'm going to take 5. Now, did you see there that I had my finger over my lips? First of all, I touched it before I noticed it, and when I noticed it, it stayed there for some time. And the reason was I was having a lot of trouble with the stuff coming through, and so the reason was really that there was fire here. The fire is a very creative force, yet it interferes with the receptive process, and so you need the water. Water provides reception so that you can receive the information in a good way, and the fire allows you to create the new object, which is the video. And you'll see that very creative jobs like making knives, the blacksmith and that, all involve a lot of fire. In fact, a lot of manufacturing jobs involve fire, creating new stuff. Fire is important. Water to quench the steel. You know, they always have fire, they have water to quench the steel. It's two opposites. And without the water, it's a little bit difficult to receive from nature. Nature's input, because what I'm talking to is not coming from me, it's coming from nature, it's coming from the great void, if you like, the muse, which doesn't involve just me, it involves my lady also. And if you're playing in a group like the Beatles, you're getting it from all of the members and all of their ladies simultaneously. And you can start to sound like, you know, the other member of the band. I've had people say to me when I've played in groups, you know, when you sing, they say you sound just like him, and vice versa. And what happens is somehow the creative energies of the whole group are harnessed, and their ladies are harnessed, to produce a result which is at a much higher level than what could be produced by an individual. And so the formation of groups was quite extensive in the 60s with the garage band revolution. Yet nowadays this has kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit, because now you can buy machines which can replace the bass player and the drummer and so on, and you can make all of the music yourself. You will see that the music that I have made on my videos is all produced just by me and my lady. All the I can play all the instruments and just record them one after the other, and so it can produce a result, but not as great a result as a proper group can create. And if you saw the Beatles at the height of their powers, you would have realised that there was something very, very unusual going on with what these guys were producing, because they were producing at a very high level. Yeah. The same with, if you look at the Elvis Presley and that band that he had, Scotty Moore and the other ones, they were formed at Sun Record Studios. They just met there and then they just decided to form a group. And so, and Elvis was never as good. After they destroyed that group and tried to concoct an organisation of a group to play behind Elvis, so Elvis's power was reduced and taken away somewhat, compared to that, you know, baby, 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 come on baby, I want to play house with you. Okay, that song, check it out on YouTube, it's really great. Playing live with Scotty Moore and the bass player. Okay, so there's a difference between a divine group and a demonic organisation, like Led Zeppelin comes to mind. Yeah, Led Zeppelin may have had, I don't think Led Zeppelin is a really, really good example of a demonic organisation. As a musical group, you can find them, and probably the greatest example of a divine group, which had many, many members, was John Mayall, the Blues Breakers. People used to steal his lead guitarists and bass players and drummers and that, and make demonic organisations like Fleetwood Mac. And in the end, somebody else came along, somebody else stepped up, and John Mayall was always open to say, okay, yeah, you're coming along, come and join me. You know, Mick Taylor, for example, one day, John Mayall was playing at a venue, and Eric Clapton didn't turn up, yet his amplifier and his guitar were on stage, but he just didn't turn up. And Mick Taylor was like a 15 or 16-year-old kid, I don't know how old, he was very young, in the audience. And when they stopped for a break, he walked up to John Mayall and said to John Mayall, "Hey, look, can I play on that guitar? I know all the songs." And so John Mayall looked at him. You know, most people would say, badly, his organisation would say, "Oh, it's ridiculous. You know, they'd just ignore him, walk away." Yeah. John said, "Yeah, okay." So he got up and he just really ripped into it. And it was a few years later that John Mayall remembered this, and they met, and he needed a new guitarist, and Mick Taylor joined the band. Yet, if you do the dirty on the band and go and work with somebody else, you're not supposed to do that. Like, if Mick Taylor had stayed with John Mayall, his life would have been divine. He would have ended up with a nice divine lady, and he would have had a really, really great life. But he went and joined the Rolling Stones, and became like a slave in the Rolling Stones, and eventually became nothing. Well, he did redeem himself somewhat towards the end. Yet one can see, and the young Mick Taylor in John Mayall's Blues Breakers was a remarkable, gifted player, yeah. And I know Mick Jagger liked playing with him because he was very melodic, and the singer and the guitarist, it's an important combination, yeah. The one is working with the other, the singer's feeding off the melody lines that the guitarist is creating, and vice versa. And can't remember his name, the devil himself, that other member of the Rolling Stones, what's his name? Oh, I can't remember it. Oh my God, that guy who plays guitar. You know the one I mean. He made Mick Taylor's life hell. Absolute hell. Because what you have in, this is important, what you have in a demonic organisation is competition, okay, competition between the members. No longer are they working together, they're competing. And so the opposite thing happened in the Beatles. The Beatles went through a few personnel changes in the beginning, and there were too many guitarists and not enough bass players, so Paul McCartney just said, "I'll play bass." You know, I mean, it's a downgrade to play bass after you're a guitarist. It's a downgrade, really. Yet he played bass in a greater way, probably, than anybody who went before him. To sing and play the bass, I don't believe I've seen anybody sing and play the bass as well as Paul McCartney. The only person who comes close to it, I feel, is probably Jack Bruce. But not if you see Paul McCartney at his very peak of his performance, nobody can touch him to play bass and sing at the same time. And you know, I tried to do it. I was a bass player and singer, and I could barely cope with playing bass and singing at the same time. Paul McCartney. Most people have trouble with it. You know, they have to simplify their bass playing, simplify their singing, and their rhythm is affected by it and everything. Because often the rhythm of the singer is working as a counterpoint to where the rhythm of the bass and the drums is going. And so the whole business of harmony is expressed through the divine group, and competition is expressed in the demonic organisation. Now, I've used music and bands and that's an example, yet the whole thing plays out also in industry. And there's cottage industries, and then there's the industrial industry of modern day capitalist labour nations, okay? And it's a sorry state, really. I'm going to take 5. Now, you only need one bad egg to turn a divine group into a demonic organisation. And that change can happen slowly. What happens is they bring somebody in because some sort of circumstances, they need somebody, the person hasn't turned up yet, or they interview 2 people and they pick the wrong one. And it happened to me once. There was a large company that needed a data processing manager, somebody to look after all their computers. They were a large group, they had many computers, mainframes, all connected up all over the country. And they wanted somebody to manage all this stuff. And so I needed work at the time. I just decided that I was going to not be in business for myself, I was going to go back and work for somebody else. And so I approached the company, they advertised the job, and I approached them, and what they were looking for initially was somebody to go in and document the whole job of the existing data processing manager. Okay, they had a month to do this before he left, and at the same time they would consider that person for the job. And so I went in and I started to work together with the organisation, and I documented everything. Spent a month sitting side by side with the guy, and the outgoing data processing manager, and I documented all the systems in the job, because there was no documentation. It's typical of data processing departments, they had no documentation. But my forte was documentation. I always documented everything that I did, so I was good at that. And I produced a big, thick manual of standard practices for the data processing manager. Okay, and what they did in the end was they interviewed me for the job, and they interviewed somebody else who had all these qualifications, who was coming from out of town, didn't even live in the town that we lived in. And they decided to pick him instead. And I had to be together, I had to work together. It was insulting for me to have to go in and carry on working with it and work together with this guy, knowing that he got the job and everything, instead of me, and I'd lost the job. It was a very, very difficult process to go through. It really hurt me, and because I should have got the job. Nature sent me to do the job. I was available, I needed a job, they needed somebody, I was perfect for the job. And so they gave it to him. And I explained to him the book, I told him what I'd given, I gave it to him, and I don't think he ever even looked at it, because what he was a politician. He was one of these competing fellas, not intending to do anything himself. He couldn't do anything. He was just good at talking about what he could do and getting other people to do it, which a lot of managers are. That's what managers are. Whereas I would have got my hands dirty and just done the job, yeah, and found other people to help me where I needed it. Anyway, about 6 weeks later, after I'd gone home, forgotten about this thing, I get a phone call. It said, "Do you want that job?" This guy, they'd have to get rid of him. He was just no good. Yeah. So there you go. And I said at that point, I said, "Well, I have been offered another job." Because I had found another job, and I said, I'll think about it, and I thought about it for a day or two, and I said, no, look, I've already said I'm going to take this other job, so I'm not going to do the dirty on them with that. I'm going to be truthful to what I said, and not change my mind, and thanks very much but no thanks. And about 6 months later, that entire company went out of business. Entire company, because nobody could deal with their computers. Nobody. And I was the only person who had talked to the outgoing guy who knew anything about it, really. And anyway, I was living in another town at that time, so it was the end of it. But it just shows this is what can happen to organisations that don't allow the natural process to take place. I'm going to stop now. Well, there's many things I could say about harmony versus competition, but I think you got the picture. You only need to get the overview of it to understand what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with two completely different things. And the next part of the journey here is war versus peace. And you can see at the end of that last section of the video, I said that it made me very uncomfortable to be in competition with this man. And the whole process of competition is a hateful process. It engenders hate. It engenders distinguishing one from the other. Separation, okay? Instead of individuality, which means not divided, indivisible, individuality means not divided from the one nature. Competition implies division into us and them, me and him and her. And so you can never have this in a divine group. Everything has to work together. Okay, so there's a love of the members, all for one and one for all. Robin Hood and his merry band, okay? Take from the rich and give to the poor. That's what it should be. That's what the church used to be, you know? Think about it. Okay. So out of this competition, the whole idea of competition produces division into them and us. And them and us, if things go badly wrong, produces war. Unless some harmony can be created, this leads to war. And so all the wars in the world today are from competition. Okay? Competition is not healthy. The opposite of competition is cooperation. Cooperation, to operate together, working together. That is the opposite of competition. Now, this morning, just by chance, I happened to watch a very interesting video on YouTube which showed some people in the East making bronze bowls. And to make these bronze bowls, no man could make them. Not one man could do it alone. It was not physically possible to do that. And you had to have one guy working the bellows, okay? The man working the bellows, if it was too hot or if it was too cold, he had to, the thing would break, holes would appear in it, okay? He had to use his intuition, part of the group, to get the temperature just right. Then there was one guy who's watching the process and holding the object. He's the master. And then the three apprentices each have a hammer. And the three apprentices going bang, 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 bang. Like in a dance, you know, a group dance. Because one man cannot hammer it fast enough to actually to do it while the heat is at the right temperature. And there's this long process that involves this group of human beings, 5 or 6 people, and in the end this beautiful bowl comes out of the process. And this bowl lasts forever. Okay? forever. It's not something that rusts, it's not something that breaks, it's not something... This bowl can be passed down from generation to generation to generation. And I'm sure there's easier ways of making bowls. You can make bowls out of pottery, they break, you have to keep making them. No. This was for a divine civil society that had realized the greatness of making objects which last forever. And I want to draw to your mind the attention of where we're at now, because now we're making car after car after car after car. Pause. What competition does is it drives the prices of things down to where only the very worst possible players can make money, and drives out of business all the people who are making good quality artifacts. And so cars have just become less and less durable, and now we're going to get rid of all the cars on the road and replace them with a complete new set of electric cars, which nobody's going to be able to afford to buy. The poor people rely on buying 10-year-old cars or 20-year-old cars, or discarded by the rich people. Where are they ever going to find the money to buy electric cars? And the second-hand price of electric cars is terrible, really. So this is a real problem. What's really destroying the planet is the consumption. We're not making objects which last. And also, we're driving around far too much. We should be working from home. We should be working together in our divine civil society and not running around in cars destroying the planet. And that is the problem. That's what's destroying the planet. Electric cars are not going to solve it. What's going to solve it is people getting rid of their cars, not making this sort of stuff, and making long-lived items of quality, and starting to produce things in a proper way, come together in their local environment. And what will produce that, only nature knows. All I'm saying is that is the only way forward. Consumption is not the way forward. It's just going to, in the end, continue to destroy the planet. And it is not possible to have competition without wars, and to obtain peace we need to get out of a competitive culture and back to a culture, not a culture, the natural world, which is a harmony of working together. Thanks for watching.